Imagine growing up in a world where almost everything feels uncertain. Stores don't always have what you need, plans can change without warning, and most people around you try not to stand out too much. This was everyday life for millions of people who grew up in the Soviet Union, especially those who are now part of Generation X. And here's something interesting. Even decades later, many of those people still think and behave in ways shaped by that time. Not because they want to, but because the brain learns from the environment it grows up in. Let's break this down in a simple way. The brain learns normal. When you're a child, you don't question the world. You just absorb it. You learn what is safe, what is risky, what gets approval, and what gets attention you don't want. In the Soviet Union, normal had a very specific meaning. Be careful. Don't stand out. Follow the rules. Stay stable. Over time, this doesn't just become behavior, it becomes personality. Life in scarcity mode. One of the biggest influences was simple. Things were not always available. You couldn't just assume you could buy what you wanted. Sometimes shelves were empty. Sometimes you had to wait in long lines. Sometimes you bought something not because you needed it right now, but because it might disappear tomorrow. This creates a mindset that stays for years. People start thinking, if I see it, I should take it. Even today, some people who grew up in that system keep extra supplies at home. Not because they are irrational, but because their brain learned one lesson early. Nothing is guaranteed. Don't stand out. Another strong message in that environment was social safety. Being different was not always rewarded. So people learned to blend in, to observe before speaking, to think twice before sharing opinions. This created a habit. First, I check what others think, then I decide what I think. Even when the pressure disappears, the habit often stays. Stability feels safer than risk. In many modern countries, risk is exciting. Start a business, change your job, try something new. But in the Soviet system, stability was the real success. A stable job, a stable income, a predictable life. So many people grew up thinking, safe is good, risk is dangerous. That mindset doesn't vanish overnight. Even after moving into a completely new economy, many still feel uncomfortable with uncertainty. Learning to read between the lines. When people cannot always speak directly, they learn something interesting. They start listening differently. Not just to words, but to tone, to context, to hidden meaning. So many people from that environment became very good at reading between the lines. They don't just ask, what was said? They ask, what was actually meant? Then everything changed in 1991. And suddenly, everything shifted. The country disappeared. The rules changed. The system people had lived inside their whole lives was gone. Imagine waking up in a world where the normal you knew no longer exists. For many people, this was not just a political change. It was a psychological shock. Some adapted quickly. Others felt lost for years. Because when your mental model of the world breaks, everything feels unstable. Two worlds in one generation. What makes this generation interesting is that they lived through two completely different realities. First, the Soviet world. Then, a modern, global, fast-changing world. So many people today carry both mindsets at once. They can be cautious and adaptive, skeptical but open-minded, focused on stability but also aware that change is constant. The bigger idea. This story is not really about the Soviet Union. It's about something bigger. How environments shape people. How childhood becomes personality. How normal is not universal. It depends on where you grow up and what your brain had to adapt to. Because in the end, history doesn't just live in books. It lives in people, in habits, in instincts, in the way we see the world without even realizing it. And maybe the most important question is this: what parts of our own thinking feel natural, but were actually learned long ago from the world around us?